The Chargers have had a rash of injuries in their secondary, especially at safety, but there are reinforcements on the way as they just signed a former All-Pro safety to give them a boost.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen as always, and Merry Christmas to everyone as well. But to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, the Chargers have been decimated by injuries in their secondary, and they have had to go out and add several different pieces. The newest addition is former All-Pro Eddie Jackson. And the Chargers opened up JK Dobbins' 21-day practice window just in time for Christmas. And are the Chargers in position to say, hey, who is the ideal playoff matchup? I definitely have one in mind.
Yeah, and so does Athir, who wants all the smoke from the Bills, and you're definitely going to want to hear that, but also had to get into how we were wrong about Diontae Johnson, because reportedly the Chargers did want to claim him on waivers, which is definitely a surprise to us. But today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. David, it is a Chargers mailbag day, and we love to get your guys' questions on the show and love to know what you guys want to hear about. And we are on the same page with Ryan Robinson here for this first question, who asks, do you believe that Eddie Jackson can be any sort of factor in our secondary? Thanks. David, this was an interesting move, and let's talk about the fact that first he was signed to the practice squad, right? Not currently on the active roster, but that hasn't meant much, right? Like the opportunity squad, those guys get up every single week, and we've seen other guys like Eli Apple and Marcus May get signed to the practice squad and immediately be elevated to the active roster to help very, very quickly, which is, I believe, what's going to happen here with Eddie Jackson. And it's funny because Eddie Jackson is a guy we've had our eyes on for a while. I mean, we wanted him during the Staley era because he was a guy that played for the Vic Fangio Bears back in the day. And now he has been released from the Ravens this year and now gets to go to a very similar defense with the Chargers. So do you think that he will make an impact in this secondary that is, currently down a couple of their top safeties?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he's going to get his opportunity to play for sure, and it's because the Chargers just need him to. I mean, they're very, very thin in that room. Lohi Gilman still on IR. Obviously, Marcus May just got waived, injured, but putting on injured reserve, so he's done. So they had to make this move. They had to bring him in, and
Elijah Molden also missed last week too. He's banged up.
They said he was working off to the side, but still, I mean, it's just a culmination of a lot of injuries that kind of forced the Chargers' hand to make this move. And as far as Eddie Jackson is concerned, this is another player that, played in Baltimore with brother John. So a lot of familiarity there, should understand the system as they play similar systems in Baltimore as they do with the Chargers. And I think he played decently, 16 receptions allowed on 23 targets. It's a reception percentage allowed around 69.6%. The big issue for me is 3 touchdowns allowed and 3 receptions of 20-plus yards, 52, 23, and 38 yards respectively. So that's something that kind of gives me a little bit of pause. A solid run defender with a 69.3 run defense grade.
Yeah, I think that what gives you faith is what this secondary coaching staff has already been able to do, right? Like, nobody thought you would get out of Christian Fulton what you've gotten. Nobody thought that you would get out of Elijah Molden what you got. I mean, God, they had Eli Apple out there playing more than serviceable snaps for them, which is insane. Marcus May comes in, has an interception his first game. We have seen the resurgence that Tony Jefferson has had. Most scenarios with a guy like this that really probably hasn't been really good over the last couple of years, but does have some really good, years in his past, I would usually write this off. But with this defense, with this coaching staff, you do feel like this is a guy that could come in and play a factor as a guy that you can say what you want about his age and things like that, but he's going to know where he's supposed to be. And I think if you're a smart player in Jesse Minter's defense, you will have a chance to make an impact. But it's definitely not the move that we hoped for, or maybe that we thought we were going to get today, because that was Diontae Johnson. If you watch yesterday's show, you would know we were loud wrong about the
Yeah.
Chargers. Because both
Very
of us
wrong.
thought he would be, thought about him at the trade deadline and were wondering why the Chargers didn't get in on that for what he went for. And then when you see that he is refusing to go into a game for John Harbaugh, how could you imagine that Jim Harbaugh would want that guy on his team? But yet here we are. According to Field Yates, the other team that did put in a waiver claim for Diontae Johnson, because he did end up with the Texans, which is why we're having this conversation, was the Chargers. So the Chargers did want him, almost got him, and it would have been really interesting to see kind of what role he would have went into, because since you are claiming him, he would have had to be on the active roster right away. So David, we knew he would be an upgrade to their offense. We didn't think they would do it, but I do think it shows how strongly they feel about the culture in that locker room. I think it also shows you how strongly they feel they could rehabilitate a player who maybe got off on the wrong foot somewhere else.
And also just the attitude of, I'm going to literally turn over like every single stone possible, and I'm going to do anything and everything I can to improve my football team. And I think it's obviously no secret that the Chargers wide receiver room has kind of been less than stellar throughout this season, and they're just looking for somebody to add some kind of spark, add some kind of ability. And, Diontae Johnson obviously didn't look great with the Baltimore Ravens, but he did show some ability this earlier this season with the Carolina Panthers, and has had some solid production in his past. So I didn't think that they would do it. Obviously, I was very wrong, and this just goes to show you that Joe Ortiz, Jim Harbaugh, their focus is on winning. And if they think that a player can help them win more football games, then they're going to give him a shot.
And I think a clear divide from what we saw in the Tom Telesco era, where everybody had to be squeaky clean and they took almost no risks to their detriment. I'm sure sometimes it helped them as well, but I think you want to feel like you have the coaching staff that can handle somebody like that. But, the Steeler wide receivers and the divas they become after they leave, whether it's Antonio Brown or Chase Claypool and the disaster that was, or Diontae Johnson, who knows how it would have worked out either way, or how it will for the Texans. But we have a good question here from Retro Grill, who says, why did the Texans have the waiver priority? Because the Texans are first in the AFC South. You would think that a division leader would be lower than the Chargers, or at least, later on in the waiver order than the Chargers are, even though they have the same record. But David, it came down to a tiebreaker, and really they were truly this close.
Yes, extremely close. This is from Daniel Popper of The Athletic. He says, I think it was opponent strength of schedule. So aggregate winning percentage of a team's opponents. Houston's strength of schedule is 110 to 114, and then LA Chargers was 114 to 110. Lower winning percentage gets the priority. So that's the reason why the Houston Texans had the priority, and it was just the slimmest of margins. But hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and it does get a little bit complicated when you get down into the weeds of the kind of the priority waiver claims and how things kind of shake out. But that's just what it was with the Chargers, and unfortunately, Diontae Johnson goes to the Houston Texans.
Yeah, and Field Yates did confirm that is what it was on Daniel Popper's post about that. So, it is kind of stupid, the NFL continuing to reward a division leader over someone who's still fighting for a playoff spot in this instance, right? Having the same record. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where it just seeing them try to do it means something, right?
Yeah.
But I think it also kind of goes to this, what we got from Laserbeam, who says, considering the Chargers tried to claim Diontae Johnson, do you think the wide receiver group is a liability for the playoffs? Yeah, I do. I just think that, we've seen it come up and be a huge factor in kind of where the Chargers offense goes missing at points of this season for halves in games this season. And I just think that even though this is a group that is much improved, it's still not an above average wide receiver group. And I think they knew that what they have, and they were still willing to take that risk with Diontae Johnson.
That's exactly right. And they just know that when you get into the playoffs and you don't have a Ladd McConkey available, then you're in really, really bad shape. So they just don't have enough playmakers on that side of the ball, and they felt that, and that's the reason why they wanted to go bring Diontae in.
Yeah, and I think it does tell you exactly where they stand and how they feel about that room. And like we talked about, just the continued commitment to turning over every stone in order to try to make this team better in season, off season, wherever. And I just think that that's Joe Ortiz living up to his word. But even though you're not getting that playmaker, the Chargers do have a playmaker coming back because they are activating are opening the activation window on JK Dobbins, which is gigantic news for this Chargers running game. So we're going to talk about that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you about FanDuel because the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score, and just getting a vibe of what the game should be like. And the lines for this game have changed a little bit. The Chargers started out as 5.5-point favorites. They are now 4.5-point favorites heading into Foxborough this week, going West Coast to East Coast, which is always tough, and getting a playoff atmosphere. I think it's going to be a good test, but it's not a game that they can overlook, and I think a very important game potentially for JK Dobbins to go back for. But there's so many things you can bet with on FanDuel, which players will score, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. David, let's continue getting into this Chargers mailbag here, but first, some news that came out for some reinforcements on the horizon, and that is great news that JK Dobbins has had his window to be activated to the active roster open, which means the Chargers have 21 days to activate him and bring him onto the active roster. But with the way things are going, I think it's just a thrill to know that he's coming back this year, especially with a guy that has the history of season-ending injuries. To see him go on injured reserve, but to still potentially get him back, and also to have survived without him, to still be in a place where now he can come back at the end of the season and hopefully add on to a running game that at least showed some improvement last week. But there's no mistake, David, this running game goes through JK Dobbins, and the best version of this Chargers offense has him in it.
No question about it. It's great news. And, obviously we heard some reports and some different interviews that kind of indicated that this would be the case, but it is nice to know that it is official that the Chargers opened up JK Dobbins' 21-day practice window. And I've talked about it before. JK Dobbins is the most explosive running back on this team by far. He is the guy that can take it the distance anytime he touches the ball. He runs hard. You look at the stats, he's still rushing close to almost 5 yards a carry, and it's fantastic to watch him. So to get him back, it's going to be a really nice shot in the arm for a running game that looks like it's trending upwards.
You have to hope so. I mean, the consistency is what you've been searching for all season, but we knew it would be really hard to find that without him on the field. It was hard to find it with him on the field, but ESPN did report that he could be back as soon as Saturday's game against the New England Patriots, but I think as of this point, it's nothing close to a sure thing, especially with how they've kind of treated guys coming back from IR so far. We've seen both. We've seen guys come back instantly. Hayden Hurst last week, activated. He's on, right? We've seen it go the other way too, where you're limited all week and then you don't play and they keep you out for another week. So I think that to just illustrate how much better they are with him, I mean, over the last 4 games, because he's missed the 4 games you have to once you go on injured reserve, the Chargers running backs did not combine for 100 yards in any of those games, right? The running backs that they have now, Kimani Vidal, obviously Gus Edwards, in the last 4 games, they've combined for more than 85 rushing yards just one time. JK Dobbins did that 4 times by himself with nobody else, right? Does bring the explosive element back to the offense. And it's just, right, like, if you can keep the improvements that maybe you made last week and the commitment they showed to the running game, protecting Justin Herbert with the running game, and putting the game away with the running game in a lot of aspects last week, and add J.K. Dobbins back into it, that's something that gives you a little bit of faith that they could have a potent rushing attack, and we just have to see if they can kind of work that out potentially over the next couple of weeks. But this comes in from Just Me, who says, play J.K. Dobbins or rest him for the playoffs? David, we know how important he is. We just talked about how important he is. Can the Chargers afford to potentially rest him these last couple of games and keep him fresh for the playoffs?
The Chargers aren't in the playoffs yet, so they don't have the luxury to be able to rest players if they are available to play. So if he's ready to go, and all indications to me seems like he is ready to go, then you got to put him out there, and he's got to play, and you got to make sure and you secure your playoff spot before you think about resting players. So I think it's important for him to get back out there, get him back in rhythm, get that motor running again, and getting going towards the playoffs. But you got to get into the playoffs before you have that luxury of sitting players.
100% agreed on all those points there. I mean, I think that until your playoff spot is secured. If you can go, you go. Even in I also think the Patriots are scrappy, man. This is not a game where you can afford to rest good players. I think this is kind of where it gets a little gray. If he's not 100%, don't put him out there. Right? Like if you can get him healthier and he's not quite there yet, but he probably could tough it out at 80% if you need him to, I'm resting him and I'm trying to get him back to 100%. If he's 100%, if he's feeling good, he's out there 100%. And I think that you have to be able to go get it locked up, and you might even have a chance to rest him next week. But worst case scenario, you have a couple of weeks to try to work him back in this offense and see if you can find some consistency in this running game and get, consistency with your offense. Show me that you can score in every half for the rest of the season. That's an opportunity that you get if he's out there. If he's not, then it's kind of just a total wild card going into the playoffs. But you got to get there first, and the Chargers aren't there yet because the magic number is 1, and they should wrap it up this weekend if they take care of business. But we do have this one. It's a good question, David, about Joshua Palmer, because we were thinking that this could be his breakout year. And now it's kind of more questions than answers of what you want to do with him going forward, because he's kind of been mid again. And now kind of where are you at with this guy and, who's heading into free agency in 2025?
What's up, guys? Austin from Oregon. Big Chargers fan, by the way, of Justin Herbert. Thank you, Justin Herbert, for being Oregon's godsend NFL quarterback right now. What do you think should be the future for Josh Palmer on our team? He keeps making crazy plays, crazy catches in the nick of time, but hasn't been showing much production. And is that a factor of just the Greg Roman offense, or is his time with the Chargers sort of phasing out, or do we try to keep him on a cheaper deal because he has proven he can make good plays for us and see if he can have a bigger role with us in the offense? Thanks, guys. Love the show. Take it easy. Go Dogs, go Chargers.
It's interesting because, first of all, just like the whole, Chargers, Ducks thing, like if you're mostly a college guy and then your, college team just doesn't have any quarterback in the NFL that you can root for. I mean, I guess for him, it's probably Marcus Mariota. I mean, you can't be a Broncos fan over there, Austin, now that they have Bo Nix. I'm just going to say that. But as far as this goes, it's a great question, because if you look at the most spectacular catches that have been made by Chargers wide receivers this year, it's going to be a highlight reel of Josh Palmer. The problem is you just haven't found any consistency in. I think at the beginning of the year, you're wondering, okay, well, if this dude balls out, how can you afford him in 2025? Now you're at the point where it's like, okay, well, now with the production that he's put forward, it doesn't seem like he's going to cost a huge contract if you want to bring him back. But do you want to bring him back, David? Because I think the one thing is we just talked about this receiving core and if it could be a liability in the playoffs, and I just don't know. Actually, I do know. You can't run it back with this same group. It can't be Ladd McConkey, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson. It doesn't mean you couldn't add to that and, still have Josh Palmer in the mix somewhere. But I think one of the bigger priorities in this offseason is improving that wide receiver room, and it's hard to say it's an improvement if you're bringing back Josh Palmer.
Yeah, and also I think it's appropriate and important to kind of figure out how you are seeing Joshua Palmer. Because you look at the stats, it's 353, 768, 584, and currently 543 receiving yards in his first 4 seasons in the NFL. Eventually, you are what your stats say you are. And to me, that means that Joshua Palmer is a wide receiver 3. That's just all he has been able to prove. He's had a couple of spurts where he's been able to rise to the occasion, but the consistency has not been there in his game. So considering what he's done with his numbers, he's only 25 years old. I do like his tenacity. I like the way he blocks. I do like the temperament and the mindset, and I do feel like that fits with what the Chargers want to do. And I do not believe it would be an expensive contract. So I'll say I wouldn't mind having Joshua Palmer back next year, but I also would understand and wouldn't mind if they decided to go a different direction.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is just where the lack of chemistry is between him and Justin Herbert right now, especially on the deep balls and them trying to use him as that guy, him and Quentin Johnson for that matter. And it's not that Josh Palmer isn't a good player. I mean, he does seem like he's a fine player. It's just whether or not he can be more than that. And when you're in the shadows of a Keenan Allen and a Mike Williams, you're hoping, okay, well, this is the year. Those guys aren't in the way. And when those guys got hurt in years past, he was able to kind of pick up that mantle for short periods of times and put together 100-yard games when they needed him, and that he was the focal point of the offense. It just feels like the goal should be getting better than that. The goal should be a little bit higher. The bar should be higher. If they bring him back, I would be okay with it, but I just don't think like that can't be all that you do. You still have to go find a wide receiver one. You still have to find, playmaking options on that offense that aren't Josh Palmer, because we're seeing what that offense looks like right now with the current trio they're putting out there as their starters, and it's just frankly not good enough. But we do still have more to get into, because as the playoffs creep closer, the Chargers still have to secure it, but there's a lot of different ways that it could go down. And if the Chargers are going to win a playoff game, I do think who they're going to play matters. And we have who we would want if we could pick who the Chargers are going to get. And for some reason, Athir's out here wanting the Bills because he's a sicko. So we're getting into all that today and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. I do want to tell you guys about PrizePicks, though, because PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and it's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, because unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. And they also have great promotions going on weekly, like today, where it's Taco Tuesday, where PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups, and you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks, and it's also the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. We have football on Christmas this year. This is not a drill, and you guys can get on the action with PrizePicks by going with Lamar Jackson throwing for more than or less than 217.5 passing yards, and you combine that with Derrick Henry rushing for more or less than 91.5 rushing yards. It's as easy as that, and if you hit it, you win. Download the PrizePicks app today to use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play the $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. I also need to tell you guys about Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me, and I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down, because it's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. And Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. We all do it. We all have subscriptions that we forget about, we don't know about, and we're losing money on it. And you can save that with Rocket Money. And now that I have a child that I'm trying to buy every single Christmas present for in the world, it's been really great to have Rocket Money and find all the things where I've been wasting my money because I've been using and paying for subscriptions that I'm not using. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Dave, we have more great Chargers mailbag questions to get into, but Merry Christmas to everyone, and thank you to all the everydayers for making us your first listen. As always, we appreciate you guys. If you need a second listen and you need some extra stuff to listen to as you're driving around and commuting potentially for your holiday, give it Locked On NFL a chance, because they have 2 shows a day now, and you have Tyler the Madman rolling in the morning and Tony Wiggins later on as they bring on the people who cover their teams every single day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Dave, we have a great question here from Where You At Cap, because the Chargers, barring a historic collapse, will be in the playoffs. But being in the playoffs, even though it's a great sign of what Chargers have built under Jim Harbaugh in year 1 and what they've been able to do, at the same time, who you get is important. And I think that's where this comes from, where he says, before we clinch our playoff spot, is there a team that we say, oh yeah, give me them first? David, who do you say?
Absolutely, there's a team that makes me say, oh yeah, give me them first. It's the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, to me, are a team that is very vulnerable and a team that's kind of backing its way into the playoffs. CJ Stroud has clearly regressed this year. He's a much different quarterback. He's not as dynamic as he was last year. He's turning the ball over a lot more. They have a middle-of-the-pack running game. They're missing some very key players. Obviously, we saw the horrible injury that Tank Dell suffered, where he tore his ACL and he's out for the year. And also, they've had a couple of really bad losses to the Tennessee Titans, losses to the New York Jets. That, to me, is a team where I feel like if the Chargers are going up against the Texans, I feel very confident that the Chargers can get that W.
I think that has to be the clear #1 choice. I felt like the Texans have been a little bit fraudy, and I just think that the Chargers are a good matchup for them. Obviously, Nico Collins is sick, and CJ Stroud, when he's on, has shown the ability to play at an elite level. But your strengths match up with their weaknesses. I mean, their offensive line is not good. You'd feel really good about your pass rush going up against that. Their best pass rushers come on the outside where you have your best pass protectors. Like you said, an up and down running team. I feel like the Chargers could handle Joe Mixon. But you're talking about good teams, right? Like, so you're talking about the worst of the best teams in the NFL this year. I do think there's a clear kind of hierarchy of three teams, though, and I've said it before. Give me the Texans, give me the Steelers, or give me the Chiefs. Those are the teams I want. And I've said it before. It would be so great in a year that the Chargers aren't expected to go win the Super Bowl or be true contenders to stop the dynasty that is the Chiefs. And if I could get that chance, I am taking it. At the same time, there is a chance the Chargers can get the Texans. And it's actually kind of shaping up well that way because the Steelers, the last 2 weeks of the season, have two really tough games. They have a Bengals team that has to have that game potentially depending on what happens this week with the Bengals and the Broncos. And they also had to play the Chiefs this week, who aren't going to be resting any starters because they still have something to play for. They could go 0-2. The Chargers could leapfrog them. And if the Ravens can hold off the Texans, and they're playing this week as well and could wrap that up, they'll win the AFC North. The Texans will stay the 4 seed, and the Steelers would get bumped down to the 6 seed. As long as the Chargers win both of their last couple of games and get to 11 wins, you could see a Chargers-Texans playoff matchup. And not only do I think the Chargers have a chance in that, I think I'd pick the Chargers to win that game, assuming that they're going to be winning their last 2 games of the season and showing us the things that we're hoping to see and putting away bad teams like they have all season long. But Athir has a different idea, and he sounds a little crazy for it.
Daniel, David, first of all, Merry Christmas to you, my boys, and your family. Love you. Happy New Year. Enjoy. This is what I wanted to say about the playoffs. Give me the Bills. Give me the Bills. I am not afraid. They are a fraud. Josh Allen is 2-5 in the playoffs, and that is against the Dolphins and Patriots. It's not saying a lot. I have Jim Harbaugh. I have Jesse Mintel. Let's go. Give me the Bills, baby. I'm not afraid.
That is, I mean, top 3 favorite Athir voicemails. I love that. Let's straighten out the facts really quick. So Josh Allen's 5-5 in the playoffs. He's not 2-5 in the playoffs, and the teams that he beat, right? To your point, I mean, not a lot of great quarterbacks. He did beat Lamar Jackson, so I mean that is a feather in your cap after the 2020 season. But then it was Mason Rudolph, and then it was Mac Jones, and then it was Skylar Thompson, and a 40-year-old Phillip Rivers, or the other 5 quarterbacks that he's beat. He's lost to Patrick Mahomes 3 times, Joe Burrow once, and a prime Deshaun Watson back when he was actually good and he was on the Texans and the Texans were good. That being said, maybe I'm too quick to just assume the Chargers will get blown out by the Bills. I mean, you look back to that game last year, right? I mean, it took them the entire game and a 3-point win to beat Easton Stick in the Brandon Staley-led Chargers, right? Like, that was a game. Somehow the Chargers almost beat the Bills with Josh Allen and Easton Stick last year after they lost to the Raiders 63-21.
That's true.
They have a tendency, right, to lay an egg sometimes, and we've seen it from them in the playoffs. If they're on, they could blow you out. The Chargers have struggled with more mobile quarterbacks this year, and their offense hasn't shown the ability to consistently keep up, even if they're going up against a bad offense, if that other offense gets rolling. But to that point, yeah, I mean, if the Chargers get there and it ends up being the Bills, they have a chance. I mean, the Bills can be volatile at times, but still, though, I'm taking a few other teams before I want to try to say, hey, give me the Bills.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get the smoke with the Bills right away. I mean, Athir needs to lay off the spiked eggnog, okay? The Bills are 7th in total yards per game, 9th in passing yards per game, 9th in rushing yards per game, 2nd in points per game with over 31 points a game. And the unfortunate truth here about the Chargers is that every time they've gone up against a good offense, they have gotten shredded almost every single time. So I don't know if that's a matchup that I particularly like. On the defensive side, it's a little bit different. 23rd in total yards allowed, 25th in passing yards allowed. So that, there's a secondary that you can kind of, take advantage of a little bit. But they've done a good job of keeping people off the scoreboard for the most part with 11th in points per game allowed. So the Buffalo Bills are a good football team. I mean, they're very well coached, and they have playmakers on both sides, and Josh Allen's a beast. He's probably one of the best running quarterbacks outside of Lamar Jackson in the NFL, and he does it every single season. So I don't necessarily want it, but
David's afraid.
if that's what it takes, let's go.
Yeah, the thing is about the playoffs, like you want the Chargers to get that first win, right? Like you want him to be able to Justin Herbert to get that monkey off his back, to be able to say he's won in the playoffs, so that narrative can die. Your best chance to do that is not the Bills. I love that Athir wants the Bills. I love that Athir has the confidence the Chargers could go take the Bills out. At the same time, I would like it more if the Chargers got an easier matchup and then could get Justin Herbert his first playoff win. And then after that, it's all house money to me anyways. After that, give me anyone. You're going to have to go through them at some point anyway. And we did have a question from Matthew, that voicemail that we won't be able to get to, just about if the Chargers are built to play in the elements and go to Buffalo, because that's not an easy place to play. Go to Baltimore, which is not an easy place to play. And this weekend will be a good test for that. I mean, the Chargers, if you think of cold weather teams, you think about physical teams who run the football well. That hasn't really been the Chargers' MO this year. As much as they want to be that, they've gotten beat up in the running game at times. They've had their issues, obviously, with their own running game. So right now, they're not really built for that. This will be a huge test as far as that goes. But thank you guys, as always, for checking the show out. We really appreciate you guys. Merry Christmas, David. I know we wouldn't be here without the fans. And I mean, we definitely want to wish the fans a very, very Merry Christmas.
We absolutely do. Thank you all so much for being with us and supporting us all year long. Merry Christmas to all of you and your beautiful families.
Absolutely. And thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen. To make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. On Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. And you can always call in with your bold predictions, your buy or sells, or your mailbag questions at 323-524-7924. But scheduling note, tomorrow we will not be here. It is our Christmas day that we're taking off this week. We'll be back on Crossover Thursday and also with our Keys for Success show on Friday. So enjoy your family. We enjoy you guys and appreciate all that you guys do to make this show possible. And Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Merry Christmas to little Dilly. I love you. First Christmas. We'll be back with you guys on Thursday for Crossover Thursday. Until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.